So it seems almost certain that Chris and Deb Stearns are pushing for TBI as an excuse for Stephan, and that the defence team are quite possibly going to run with it. We've heard several times now where Chris and Deb talk about this TBI of Stephan's, and this came up in the recent interview that we've just gone through where they spoke with Hidden True Crime. But you also, when you look at many of the documents or the motions that are being put out by the defence, and can I say, I'm disappointed because I expected at least another 10 motions by now. But, sorry. But in terms of motions from the defence, it seems quite clear that they are wanting to use the TBI as an excuse for Stearns. I believe they want to present it as a mitigating circumstance, and one of their motions supports that. They talk about wanting to be able to present mitigating circumstances to the jury. And those particular mitigating circumstances, they want the jury to be instructed that they have to accept those mitigating circumstances. Normally, it's up to each individual juror to decide for themselves if something constitutes a mitigating circumstance. But the defence actually want the jury to be instructed that they have to accept these particular mitigating circumstances. And they've also said that they want to be able to present mitigating circumstances, but essentially without providing any documentation or specialist evidence. In other words, they want to be able to present mitigating circumstances without proving them and tell the jury that they have to accept these mitigating circumstances regardless, without proof. And to me, that points directly to the TBI, because we know that there appear to be no records other than a closed lawsuit which occurred almost 30 years ago. So, with all that in mind, and from, like I said, listening to the Hidden True Crime interview, I wanted to delve a bit more into that, and I have spoken about the TBI in another previous video. But from thinking about the TBI, and from also working through this interview with the Stearnses, I started connecting the dots a bit and realised that this claim of his behaviour having deteriorated and his just general attitude on life having deteriorated after the TBI is flawed logic, and that there are actually multiple environmental factors that were occurring in Stephan's life at around that period of time, which had to have had a significant impact on his development. But not only that, there are accounts from Chris and Deb that show that he wasn't the perfect angel child before this TBI either. So in this video, I want to address all those things. I want to start by looking at the TBI and then looking at some other factors. And then I want to just have a look at dates and talk about also psychological development in children, because I think that is another significant factor here, because 7 or 8 is definitely significant when it comes to childhood development. It is a new phase in the developmental phases. No matter what theories of development you look at, it seems that there is so much agreement in the fact that when a child hits 7 or 8, they are moving on to a new developmental stage. And I think that's something that needs to be taken into account with these claims of Stephan having changed because of a TBI. So let's jump in, because there's a few videos to jump through and have a look at, and a few documents to look at the end. So let's just jump in and get on with it.
Has he ever suffered from like mental illness or anything?
From what?
Mental illness?
Me?
No, not him.
Okay. When he was 8, he and a friend were playing in a parking area, and a guy came out and got in his Toyota pickup truck, said hello to the kids, and then backed up over them. And they both were run over, but he got hit in the knock in the head with the bumper, and he had a slight tick. He had separation anxiety, so he slept with us for a while, and finally I said, no, you got to go to your own bed and get over that. He would go over to a neighbor's home and spend the night and show up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning wanted to come home. But as far as
nothing diagnosed or medication?
Well, he's been seeing a psychiatrist or psychologist or something. He's been on anxiety meds, depression or what have you. I have no idea what they're talking about, because obviously he doesn't share that with me. But he's battled a number of things: depression, anxiety, and what have you.
As a child or as an adult?
Maybe ADD as a child, but as an adult, more severe.
Okay.
Now, kudos to the officer or the detective there for seeking clarification, because the story that Chris was giving here was about Stephan being hit in the head with the vehicle. So at this point in time, he wasn't exactly run over, he was just hit in the head by the vehicle. He developed a tic, he developed separation anxiety, and then he starts talking about depression and anxiety and being on medication for it and having counselling. And the detective clarified that, and he paused before answering, because he didn't actually want to mention the fact that that's all as an adult. He did not have counselling or any sort of treatment as a child. But then he throws in, but he had ADHD. So he's trying to establish the TBI thing here. I think this is the first instance that it is brought up. And I think this was a spur-of-the-moment thing thrown in simply because of the question, does he have mental health problems? Chris probably thought, well, here's a good excuse that we can use. Because at this point in time, he's just learning about what his son has done. Now, he talks about the tic and anxiety, or separation anxiety. And I'm not going to argue over PTSD from being hit by a vehicle, because, of course, any child is going to have PTSD from being hit by a vehicle. I can remember when I was growing up, we lived on a very, very busy main road, and I must have been quite little. And we came home, we'd gone into town on the bus, because where we lived it was easy to get into town on the bus. And we came home, and my brother, who was a teenager, my brother's 8 years older than me, dashed across the road, got off the bus, dashed across the road over to the house, headed inside. Me being too young to actually judge vehicles and everything, dashed across the road. Thankfully I wasn't hit by a car, but I fell over in front of a car because the car slammed its brakes on and I slammed my brakes on. And that was something that has made me cautious for life when it comes to crossing the road. And that wasn't even me having actual physical contact with the vehicle. So I'm not arguing that he would have had PTSD from the experience. But the TBI, I really don't believe that it occurred. So let's listen and see how this TBI story develops.
He started taking Adderall when he was a child. I mean, he has a TBI, and so he was on an IEP through school, in the adult education program. He went to special classes. He was hit by a truck when he was 8, hit in the back of the head with the bumper, run over his torso, and then the guy heard everybody screaming, put the car drive and drove back over him, got him in the front of the head. And then, so he...
Well, how long has he been seeing the psychiatrist,
The
psychologist?
counselor there,
Yeah, counselor.
about 4 years.
So she was prescribing medications for him at least 4 or 5 years ago, whenever he started going to counseling.
Now, what Deb's doing here is that she is implying that all these things are connected with the TBI. She mentions that he's been on Adderall since he was a child for ADHD, and then now in this interview she doesn't claim that the ADHD came from the TBI, but pretty much in the same sentence, after saying for ADHD, she talks about him having this TBI. So there is that expectation for the listener to believe that the ADHD was caused by the TBI. And then, just to really nail it in and make sure that they are clear that she's saying that this TBI has been a problem, she talks about him having an IEP at school. And then goes back to talking about the TBI. So the listener is supposed to believe here that he's had a TBI, and as a result he's ended up with ADHD, and he's also struggled at school and has had to have an IEP because of this TBI. Now, if he was going to have an IEP because of a TBI, then I would imagine, now in Australia it would be the case, but you wouldn't just rock up to the school and say, my child has a TBI, so I want an IEP. There's going to be assessments of the child, and they're going to look at the child's behaviour. I would imagine that his IEP probably would say something like his mother claims that he had a TBI, because there would be no medical records to support that. And if every parent were to go into a school and say, my child has a TBI, so he needs an IEP, it would be ridiculous, it would be chaos. So obviously, schools have to work on what is provable. So the IEP would have been based on an ADHD diagnosis. There would be paperwork showing that he is diagnosed with ADHD. It may also have been created because of behavioural issues. Because, according to Deb, Stephan was a little shit, basically. So, there would be no connection between this supposed TBI and an IEP, because there could not be a connection made other than, like I said, probably a comment somewhere saying that the mother claims that he has this. But there won't be anything to support that. Now, she ups the ante. She makes this TBI sound more significant than when Chris discussed it, because she talks about him being knocked over, hit on the front of the head, and then apparently he got up and got knocked on the front of the head as well. I'm trying to figure out how that works, because she also said that he got run over on the pelvis. And another time she says lower back. So, I don't know. I cannot, in my head, visualise how that is possible. But I can't say that is not truth. But then, where is the witnesses from this? sounds like the driver was unaware that those two boys were there. And from what we hear from Stearns' friend, Deb was actually still inside the restaurant paying, and the boys had gone out on their own, unsupervised, into a car park. So we don't know. We haven't got any witness accounts that we know of about this. But anyway, let's keep going with listening to what they have to say about this TBI.
Well, we know we're not the cause of it. We're trying to pursue a conversation about an accident Stephan had 30 years ago as to possibility of causing this TBI. 30 years ago when Stephan had this accident, and just so the public can know what that consisted of, Stephan was literally run over by a pickup truck twice. He and a friend were playing in a parking area, and when he was 7 or 8 years old, the guy came out to his truck, a small Toyota pickup truck. "Hey guys, how you doing?" Gets in the truck and immediately backs over them. Pushes Stephan down into a bit of a hole in the parking lot, drove right over him, and hit him in the head with the bumper as he backed up the first time, and then if that was enough, he pulled forward and ran over him again. The fact that Stephan isn't...
They hit him in the back of the head first, and then when Stephan raised up to look, he heard the kid screaming. He quickly put it in gear and drove forward and hit him in the front, and then came up over his body, up over his pelvis area.
The fact that he wasn't permanently disabled and wheelchair bound is a miracle.
Thank the mud.
But
So something that's significant here is when Chris is saying, he's lucky it wasn't worse, essentially. Deb says, "Thank the mud." And out of context, it probably sounds a bit odd, but when you listen to the interview that one of Stearns' friends did on Grey Hughes' channel, and I covered this last week, he actually mentions the fact that Stephan and his friend were playing in the mud in a car park. So they were basically in the mud behind this vehicle playing. So we know that it was a soft landing for him. He may have bumped his head when he was knocked down by the vehicle, but he landed in the mud. So that says that they're saying the only injuries occurred from the vehicle. You could believe that was the cause of a TBI until you hear the rest of the story.
There wasn't, when he was released from the hospital, the doctor said, "Hey, be cognizant of any difference in his attitude and his demeanor and such." And we pressed for more information, and we just told that he could have some headaches, dizziness, nausea, sensitivity to light and stuff, may not be able to wake up or go to sleep. And there could be some other physical traits. He developed a tic for a while, and he outgrew that. He did suffer
PTSD.
From PTSD and also separation anxiety.
Now, something really important that one of my subscribers mentioned the other day when I was reviewing this particular video is that it is standard protocol in schools. If a child bumps their head, and it doesn't have to be a significant bump, just if they bump their head, that it is standard protocol just to notify the parents that the child has bumped their head and to watch out for these signs, all these signs that Chris basically described, because they're all signs of a concussion. It is just normal cautionary advice. And it sounds to me like he had a concussion. And they've said to them, watch out for these various signs of concussion. And if anything becomes a concern, bring him back into the hospital. If it was a TBI, he would have been admitted to the hospital and kept in, not sent home with a warning about possible concussion.
We just never knew what to expect, but they just told us to be on the lookout for things. And what we did find is that his personality changed. He changed 180 degrees. He was a high energy kid, full of love, laughter, and such, and to something totally different.
The troglodyte.
And then he started experiencing some educational problems, and Debbie can relate to that. We had to put him into an individual education plan and what have you. We finally realized that we needed to take him out of the school and put him into a homeschool environment, which was held to a strict regime, and Debbie did a great job of managing that for him.
So the claim here is that he wasn't as energetic and bubbly and everything after the accident. I do want to point out that in one of these interviews, one of the things Deb claimed was that he was basically out of alignment and they had to take him to a chiropractor after the accident because he needed to walk with a cane. Now, to me, that says that not only was the child in some pain, but if he needed to see a chiropractor and have his spine put back in alignment, then, of course, he's not going to be bubbly and bouncing around immediately after the accident. And like I said, there's also a possibility of PTSD. We also heard from one of Stephan's friends that apparently after the accident, Deb essentially blamed everything on the accident and essentially told Stephan that he was a loser because of the accident, that he was damaged because of the accident. So he was being given negative messages from his mother, from what we are being told. In terms of his behaviour changing and him having educational problems, we're talking about an 8-year-old. This is a developmental stage for children where you do start to see the problems that exist. They're moving out of infant into child, basically, in a basic way of discussing it. But I will come back to that at the end of this video. But it is important to recognise that it is a important developmental phase for a child. Those of you who've had kids will know exactly what I mean. There is definitely a change from infant to child around the time of 7 or 8. 7 to 11 is, that's one new phase of development for the child. And that's where he would have been at that point in time. But there were definitely other factors affecting what was going on with Stephan at this point in time.
Yes.
So, could you talk a little bit more about the aftermath of that? Was he hospitalized for a period of time?
Nope.
No, they treated him, kept him for a couple of hours, did a bunch of x-rays, did an MRI,
Okay.
him home. Because
Okay.
I think they offered to keep him overnight, but I wanted him to come home. I would rather be home than in a hospital exposed to a lot of germs. And I'm kind of weird that way. I don't like hospitals, but I ended up having to take him to a chiropractor to get him to walk straight again. He was walking on a cane for over a month.
Wow.
Okay.
So he walked in there on a cane. He walked out twirling it around like, Groucho Marx. So it worked. But the car had run over his pelvis and his low back when it hit both times. So he got double swatted.
So that's what I was saying about the walking with a cane, and that was over a month. So you can imagine that he certainly wouldn't have been an overly bouncy, happy child for that month that he was walking with a cane. Talking about him actually in the emergency room, she states he was only in there for a couple of hours. They did x-rays and they did an MRI. What does that mean? They saw no sign of any sort of traumatic brain injury. There might have been possible concussion, so they warned them about the signs of concussion, which is standard protocol when a child has bumped their head. But the fact that they did not keep him, they did not admit him, they offered to keep him overnight. And like I said this in the video the other day, offering to keep him overnight is not the same as saying we need to admit him. Sounds to me like she was probably making a fuss and they said, would you like us to keep him overnight if you are concerned? And she's saying no. So clearly she wasn't concerned either. The fact that she was more concerned about there being germs in the hospital than any sort of traumatic brain injury tells me that at the time it wasn't even something that they considered. I think it's something that they're now considering at a later date because it is convenient, as well, it excuses them in their minds, but it also, in their minds and apparently in their lawyer's mind, is a defence. But clearly, if something was wrong, it would have shown on the MRI. They would have admitted him.
Did you notice any memory loss from after the accident?
Yes, I did. He couldn't recall things easily. We would have to sit down and refresh his memory on some things that happened. He would look at pictures and he would say, where was this taken? When was this? So yes, he lost a chunk of memory.
Now, I spoke about this the other day, and I'm not going to go too much in depth, but I'm not convinced by this argument that he lost a lot of memory. First of all, clearly Stephan is interested in only what interests him. So chances are he might have been daydreaming. She might have been telling him something that was totally boring and irrelevant and daydreaming. And it sounds like both of them, Chris and Deb, can yabber on for quite a bit. Not only that, but if there is a ADHD diagnosis, there can be so many factors affecting concentration, and they don't necessarily point to a TBI. So if that's the only thing they have that points towards a TBI, I don't buy it.
After the accident, you guys mentioned that you thought there were symptoms of PTSD. It sounds like maybe there could have been some depression too. I'm not quite sure, but
yes, completely.
Did you guys ever consider, or did you get him into counseling, or did you try to get any help for him at any point?
Well, he, as an adult, he was in counseling and
years.
For years. So I don't know. Obviously, we're not privy to what was discussed and what have you, but
nice little sidestep there by Chris. They were both paused by that question. John wanted to know if they basically sought out any help for Stephan as a child because of his TBI. If they'd sought out help for the PTSD or the anxiety or the depression, or essentially for the TBI. You get this long pause where I think they suddenly realise, well, we have to answer this, and we don't have the answer that would be convenient. So then Chris sidesteps with, he had counselling as an adult. In other words, when he was in his 30s. So over 20 years after the accident, apparently Stearns himself sought counselling. But they didn't seek counselling or anything after the accident. How concerned were they after the accident then? Did they truly believe at the time that this accident caused all these changes in their son? If so, why didn't they act?
I'm just more interested in whether you, I guess part of my question is whether you thought that his problems rose to the level of seeking help, or do you feel like they were kind of under that bar still
I felt
as
like
a child?
I thought they were under the bar. I never thought that, oh my God, he's so bad, we need to go and get him help. Let's go put him in a hospital somewhere.
No, it was nothing like that. I mean, again, the son we knew versus the son we now know, two different people.
There was definitely a nice bit of questioning there by John. He's redirected them back. So after asking them about counselling, treatment, etc., and they've gone off on the tangent of, well, he did seek counselling as an adult, John has redirected it back to the childhood issues and asked them if they felt that the problems with his TBI rose to the level where they needed to seek help for him. And you can hear in their tone of voice that they scoff at that notion, which to me says they never saw the TBI as an issue. Chances are they never even considered it to be a TBI, and that it's something that they have now considered because it's convenient. They're saying that there was never enough concern for this TBI for them to seek any treatment. And then what Chris says about the boy that they knew as opposed to what he became, it seems pretty clear to me that what he is referring to is Stephan the boy was not Stephan the adult predator. So he's essentially, without realising he's doing it, he has essentially said that the TBI did not turn Stephan into a predator. And that the TBI that they are claiming is a TBI wasn't that significant. Once again, I believe it was just a mere concussion, if it was even a concussion. A bump on the head.
And so was the cognitive testing or the neuropsychological testing, was that done later to kind of assess?
That was that was because of the school system.
Oh,
they highlighted him as they thought potential ADHD, and we ended up going through a doctor then who evaluated him, gave him all kinds of tests and everything, and found that yes, he is ADHD, and he wasn't before. He was very focused before. I mean, the kid was laser scope focused on things. After that, he couldn't keep a conversation going.
So even the testing that he had done later on wasn't because of concerns over the possibility of a TBI. It sounds like it was concerns the school clearly flagged up that this child had behaviour problems, possibly concentration problems, and he was diagnosed with ADHD. And she's claiming, well, he never had it before then. Before then, he could be laser focused. Someone needs to actually explain to Deb what ADHD is. Yes, it's called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but calling it attention deficit is somewhat misleading. those of us who have ADHD will tell you that we are capable of the most extreme levels of hyperfocus. What does that mean? That means when we get started on something that is of interest to us, we are going to laser focus on that. And getting us to focus on something else is a challenge. So she's basically said that he's had the symptoms of ADHD his whole life. The laser focus thing has always existed. In the videos that I played from this interview, she discusses when he was 3 and they were staying in a hotel at Disney and he got hold of a key for a liquor cabinet. And he was determined. He was not going to give up till he got into that liquor cabinet as a 3-year-old. That to me screams ADHD. He was laser focused on that task and he was not going to quit until he achieved it. But let's acknowledge, they never did any testing, never took him for any testing or assessments because of concerns over a TBI. They took him because they were prompted to do so by the school because of behaviour issues or learning issues or both. Can we also acknowledge here that in terms of diagnosing ADHD and ASD, autism spectrum disorder, that a lot of professionals won't give that diagnosis till a child is 7 or 8. I know sometimes it's glaringly obvious. I think I was diagnosed when I was about 5. But a lot of paediatricians will wait and watch developmental phases with a child and see how that child develops before considering a diagnosis of ADHD. So to say that, well, he didn't have it before he was 8, chances are, well, like I said, a lot of what they've described to me sounds like ADHD from the get-go. But chances are that it only became more apparent when there were greater expectations on him, when he was in a learning environment that was less play-based and more based on focusing, sitting still, all the things that are harder for a child with ADHD. Because in those early childhood years, play-based learning is utterly perfect for the ADHD child. It's only when they reach about grade 3 and now they're considered to be a primary level child and you see a considerable reduction in play-based learning quite often. And that's when suddenly all these problems become apparent.
Just in general, as a child, how would you describe Stephan?
Before or after?
I would say it's two sides of the same coin. There was one side absolutely delightful and beautiful and wonderful and proud to be his parents, and there was the other side that came later that sometimes you didn't even like him. I mean, I can say I can love somebody, but I don't have to like them. I don't have to like the way they act, but that doesn't mean I don't love them. And
Okay, even before considering the comments made by Stephan's friends about her essentially being a psychologically abusive parent, that comment there to me suggests this cycle of rejection, this cycle of disdain, with occasional happy moments, basically. She should be saying here, I didn't like the behaviours. But she's saying she didn't like him. And I would say that that negativity came across. Here's something really important to know about children with ADHD. Children with ADHD can achieve phenomenal success if they are given encouragement. It is super, super important for children with ADHD to feel that someone believes in them so that they can learn to believe in themselves. Because for a child with ADHD, now I can't remember the exact statistics, but by the time a child with ADHD is 10, they have received something like 10,000 more negative sanctions than a neurotypical child, a child who does not have ADHD. And they take that on board. And they develop what is called rejection dysphoria. They become afraid of being told off, of being rejected. And they develop strategies to avoid that. They lie. They make up stories where it's someone else's fault. Or they simply don't try, or they develop difficult behaviours to basically hide the fact that they don't want to try. Because if you're expecting negativity, why bother trying? Why not just jump straight to the negativity? And you see that so often with children with ADHD. And yet, if one person shows them that they believe in them and shows them how to believe in themselves, the sky is the limit. Deb has essentially admitted her negativity towards Stephan. So I'm not surprised that he ended up being a right royal little shit. And that he ended up the way he is. Could you blame that on the TBI? Well, you could if there were medical records to support it. But what we're hearing here is a not so brilliant family home life, a child who may have had ADHD all along, a child who certainly doesn't have the most brilliant relationship with his mother. There's a lot of factors here, and I think there's even more factors to consider, which we'll get into.
What else was his childhood like? Did he have a pretty normal childhood? Did he have siblings? Only child?
Well, he has an older brother that was in the Navy, but you know,
They're 11 years apart, so it's basically like having raised two single children.
Okay.
because of the age separation, what have you. I mean, his older brother, they weren't very close because of the age difference. So his older brother was never around that much.
Okay.
Well, he joined the Navy right out of high school. He and a few of his friends, and they've done wonderful with their lives. But
So did anyone else do the math on this? Stephan has a brother who is 11 years older than him. And that brother, straight out of high school, joined the Navy. And we know that pretty much from that time onwards, he had pretty much nothing to do with the family. So if he, straight out of high school, joined the Navy, that puts him at 17 or 18. Being 11 years older than Stephan, that puts Stephan at around 7-ish. Maybe just turning 7. Who knows? We don't know when his brother's birthday was. But let's say most people are 18 by the time they finish high school. So that means that when Stephan was 7, there was a major upheaval in his home life. Yes, you can say that they weren't close because of the age difference and because his brother moved out. But I can assure you that until his brother moved out, he probably looked up to his brother. I mean, after all, he wanted to join the armed forces himself when he finished high school, which to me says that either Deb was pushing him to do that, Deb was pushing him to live up to his brother's brilliance, which would be another indication of why Stearns was like he was, or that he looked up to his older brother and wanted to follow in his footsteps. And no matter the age difference, if you are in a household with 2 parents and an older sibling, no matter how much older that sibling is, the change of having that older sibling suddenly gone, not just moving somewhere else within the town, but moving to a completely different place. Suddenly they're not in your life. That is going to impact. And it's going to impact especially on a developing child, a 7 or 8-year-old. Now, isn't that interesting that that occurred at around the same time that he had this accident? Are you going to tell me that that did not have an impact on him, having his brother moving out, having his brother suddenly not in his life? Because to me, I would say that would actually have a significant impact on a child. Doesn't matter the age difference. So maybe you're not sitting down and sharing Hustler magazines with each other and looking at photos together or having conversations about hot girls. But they still would have had a relationship. It would have impacted on him. And it seems that they seem to have completely ignored this when they're talking about changes in Stephan around the time of this accident.
And that really at an early age, because we came down from Georgia to Disney World, and he got the key to the liquor bar,
The minibar.
and he stayed there focused until he got that key and unlocked it at 3 years old. I mean, he was like that laser
He
focused.
didn't want liquor, he wanted candy.
Yeah, but he was
The expensive candy that's in those.
He was very, very vocal with us that he wanted more candy because we bribed him with candy all the way down on the plane. And we were waiting for the car to come to get the car seat put in, jump seat for him. And I'm gonna let you tell it because I started laughing.
So we're in the car, we're on the way to this dinner, and he's in the back seat wearing a sailor suit. And I want
cute.
candy. No, Stephan, I'm looking at the rearview. No, Stephan, you can't. We're on the way to dinner. Don't want to spoil dinner. I want candy. No, you can't have candy. And he goes, I looked in my rearview mirror, looked at her, and just started laughing. And I said, no candy. And so everybody's complimenting how cute he looks and what have you. And so I got to tell you a cute story.
So on one hand, we're trying to claim that he was like an angelic child, so perfect before this accident. And they've just relayed 2 separate incidents from when he was 3 years old. The first one is that whole obsession with getting hold of a key and wanting to get into the liquor cabinet, and he wasn't going to give up till he tried. Did you hear them saying, no, we took the key off him and put it out of reach and told him off because that's not appropriate for a 3-year-old? No, clearly they thought it was amusing and they watched him while he continued to try and get into the liquor cabinet. And then the next story pretty much sums up their parenting, doesn't it? saying they bribed him with candy all the way on the plane, so got him high as a kite on sugar. And then in the car, it sounds like he was being a complete utter brat, chucking a tantrum because he wanted candy. And they thought it was funny. They thought it was so funny that they even shared the story with their friends at dinner. And I'm guessing from the way they're talking about it that they took him to dinner with them in his little sailor suit. And so this story was relayed in front of 3-year-old Stephan. How cute is he because he throws tantrums when he doesn't get his way? So to turn around and claim that there was never any problems with him until after the TBI is just complete utter rot.
My mother's house was open. If she had a child in need, house was open. She took me back in when I needed it. During our almost divorce that everybody seems to be so interested in. It happened over 30 years ago, and if we could get through it and forgive each other and come back stronger, why can't they just leave us alone about it? And I don't think that affected Stephan. Didn't last that long. What was it? 3 or 4 months?
A minute.
A minute out of 44 years.
Did you talk to Stephan about that situation?
I never gave him the reason why. And I was going to California because I had to have some surgery done and I needed to have somebody that could help me rehab from it because I was not.
He was never exposed to it.
No, he was not.
So it was like a moot point.
I guess it was a moot point. But I didn't run away to California just to escape Chris. I went there because Chris was working and traveling and I needed help. And my mother offered to help.
Okay. So you don't see that as having any impact upon Stephan?
No.
No. If anything,
He was what, 7 years old at that time?
Yeah, he was in elementary school.
Yeah. Again, he wasn't part of it. There wasn't any confrontations because we were separated at the time. So it was just, no, he was not involved.
Now, I discussed this also in my review of this interview with the Stearnses and Hidden True Crime. You're kidding yourself if you believe that an 8-year-old is not going to be affected, a 7 or 8-year-old is not going to be affected by you splitting up and basically beginning divorce procedures. We're talking about a kid who has had his older brother vanish, gone off to join the Navy, was it, or Air Force or something. And now his parents have split up. His mother has uprooted him and taken him to California. So he's in a completely new house. He's been taken away from his friends. He's been taken away from his school. He's not able to see his father by the sounds of it. And you think that's not going to affect him. And like I said in my previous video, I find it very unbelievable that Deb would have been nice about Chris during the whole process that was going on. Maybe she didn't say to Stephan, your father's been having an affair with another woman and he's got all these materials that are perhaps all these adult materials that I don't approve of. Maybe she's not saying that to an 8-year-old kid, but he would have heard conversations in the house about what was going on, and I have no doubt that Deb would have said stuff about what was going on as well. And look, at the end of the day, kids aren't stupid. Of course he knew what was going on. Of course he would have been affected by what was going on. They're claiming it was only a few months. From what I can see, it was at least a 6-month period, possibly longer, and we'll get to that towards the end of this video. But that also, now Chris is saying he was around 7. It was a bit later than that. And I'll show you how all these all interconnect shortly. But it was probably about a year after the TBI, meaning that there was probably tension in their marriage around the time of the TBI as it is. Because these things don't usually just completely blow up. Usually they fester for a while before they blow up. And then this has happened. So how can they claim that the TBI is the reason for him turning out the way he did? There were a lot of influences in his life at a phase when his psychological development depended on having stability, a stability that did not exist.
And I am loud. When I'm frustrated, I yell. I don't scream. Somebody told us that I'm a screamer. I don't scream, I yell. If they want to hear a scream, I'll show them a scream. But,
She's Irish.
yes,
Do not upset the Irish.
I am Irish. I have an Irish temper. I go from 0 to below real quick. And I do yell. I do not beat. Do not abuse him physically, but I yelled.
Now, we heard from Stephan's friends about her being quite loud and quite verbally aggressive with him. It also, from the many things she said, sounds to me like she was psychologically abusive. And if their marriage was on the rocks at around the same time that he went through the TBI, I'd imagine there was quite a lot of yelling going on. Not only that, it seems like Stephan has grown up in a household where his mother dealt with frustrations by yelling. These are all things that are going to impact on the emotional, psychological development of a child. And yes, that is going to start to really show as the child moves out of infancy into childhood around the age of 7 to 11, which is the time that they are basically putting their fingers on and saying, this is when he changed, this is when he became more difficult, and we're blaming it all on the TBI. So let's go through a few documents that I think give us a bit of a timeline and shed a bit of light on things. Now, again, I will upload all these documents to Patreon. So if you want copies of these documents, they'll be there available for free. So my Patreon is a free membership, and any documents I put in there are also free. There is a $1 and a $2 tier if you wish to provide my channel with a bit of support. But really, if you're just wanting to get hold of documents or just want to keep up to date, and I'll try and get better at doing that, then there is no cost to join my Patreon. Now, what we have here, first of all, is from the insurance company that paid out on Stephan's TBI injury. But it wasn't TBI injury. It paid out on the accident. So this is an order of dismissal. Stipulation for dismissal having been entered into by and between counsel for the plaintiff, Stephan M. Stearns, a minor, by and through his natural mother and best friend, Deborah Stearns, the defendant. GEI Co. General Insurance Company, and it appearing therefrom, and to the satisfaction of the court that the foregoing cause has been amicably settled by the parties thereto, and is therefore ordered and adjudged that the above and foregoing cause be, and the same is, dismissed with prejudice, with each party to bear their own attorney's fees and costs. The court retains jurisdiction to enforce settlement agreement. So basically what they mean there is that they have reached a settlement there with the insurance company, which is, I believe, Paula has done a video talking about this settlement. I believe he received $20,000 or something. Saying that it was dismissed with prejudice basically means that they can't raise a new suit. Without prejudice would mean that it opens the door to future legal proceedings, but with prejudice basically means that's it, end of story. There can be no more legal proceedings over this case. Now, if you believed that your son had a TBI and you believed it was going to affect him for life, would you accept just $20,000? And would you accept the case being dismissed with prejudice, meaning that there is no other option for further legal action down the track? To me, this action says to me, no TBI. This is just a standard insurance payout for Stephan, basically, just because of him being in a motor vehicle accident, essentially. The date there is 11th of May 1998, so we'll just keep that date in mind. I probably should apologise. I have currently got the air conditioner, an evaporative cooler and a fan running because it's kind of hot again this afternoon. So this is another page relating to that case, and I pulled this one up just simply to highlight. In the middle paragraph, it actually states that the date of the accident was the 26th of September 1994. So that does fall when Stephan was 8. Okay, I'm going to work backwards here, just because this is the order of the document. Hopefully I can upload this one onto Patreon because it's like 91 pages long, all the documents relating to their divorce. So this is basically a petition to withdraw from Deb Stern's attorney. And I've pulled this up mainly to pull up dates. So the date for this is January 16th that it was filed, a petition to withdraw. And it is the lawyer basically saying they want to withdraw from working for Deb, and saying that the filing was made on the 29th of September 1997. So basically Deb Stearns filed for a divorce on the 29th of September 1997. This solicitor was working for her on her behalf. And then what you see in several documents is that basically Deb owed this solicitor $2,500 and was ghosting her. So it sounds like, and you'll see this because I will go through the divorce documents, it sounds like financially it was more convenient for them to get back together. I personally believe that's the only reason that they decided to get back together, and that possibly otherwise the divorce would have continued. But it seems like after that date, Deb just basically ghosted her lawyer and didn't respond to any phone calls, correspondence or anything like that. So the lawyer basically turned around and said, well, this is a petition to withdraw because my client isn't communicating with me at all. So you have the filing on the 29th of September 97, and you have the petition to withdraw January 16th, 1998. So essentially what you have here is a legal filing with regards to custody and payments from Chris Stearns. And you'll see here that this is roughly 12 months after Stephan's accident. So you have in re the marriage of petitioner Deb Stearns, respondent Chris Stearns. It is hereby stipulated and agreed by and agreed the parties and petitioner's attorney of record as follows. The parties acknowledge that the minor child of this marriage, Stephan Michael Stearns, born April 25th, 1998, has resided in the state of California, County of Orange, since September 1995, and that California is his home state. The respondent hereby acknowledges and agrees that he submits to the state of California, County of Orange, in the above referenced matter. Respondent further acknowledges that California is the appropriate forum and it is in the best interests of the child for the state of California to have jurisdiction over this matter. So if you remember, what has occurred here is that they were actually living in Georgia, and Deb essentially fled to California, left Chris, and she has essentially admitted in her interviews that while she did go there because she needed help with her foot operation or whatever, but that she was also going there to flee from Chris, and she took Stephan with her. So they claimed that the divorce or the separation was from December of that year, and yet here we have them saying that she actually moved there in September of 95. So to me, I would say that that's when the separation counts as far as I'm concerned. So this divorce, which was supposedly a blink of an eye, there was a custody hearing in March of 96. So the parties shall have joint legal custody of the minor child, presently 9 years of age, with sole physical custody to petitioner, subject to respondent's right to visitation at times as agreed to between the parties. So essentially, having separated, with Deb having taken Stephan away to California, away from his father, away from his school, his friends, etc., she's then sought sole custody, which has been granted by the court, and he's been allowed basically visitation rights. And they're claiming that Stephan was unaffected by this. This is all beginning a year after his supposed TBI. And like I said, these sort of things don't just blow up out of the blue. There's going to be tension in marriage first. Let's not forget also that around the time of his TBI, this was when his brother racked off, basically. And then you have petitioner's order to show cause to be continued to May 13th, 1996. Basically, because he didn't turn up, he has till May to present his side of the story, basically. So it sounds like this was actually quite nasty. It wasn't just a, let's separate, let's think about a divorce. None of this affected Stephan. There were a number of legal proceedings going on. Around the same time that this was going on, you have Deb taking legal action over claims that her foot operation was botched. This is all happening roughly 12 months after his accident. Okay, I am going to read through the divorce paperwork because I think this is also significant in terms of helping us understand what was going on in Stearns' world around this particular time. This shows that there clearly must have been a lead-up, there must have been tension in the household, all things that would have had an impact on a young 8-9-year-old boy. So I, Deborah Stearns, declare I'm the petitioner in the above entitled matter and am personally familiar with the facts set forth in this declaration. Yada yada. 2. The respondent and I were married on August 16, 1980 and separated on December 22nd, 1995. And yet we know that she actually headed to California in September of 95. There was one child, the issue of our marriage, Stephan Michael Stearns, born April 25th, 1986. Presently 9 years of age. The respondent and I resided in the state of Florida until approximately September 2nd, 1995, when our son and I returned to Yorba Linda, California to reside. So I was wrong, they were in Florida, not Georgia, sorry. I returned to California for the purpose of having surgery on both feet and physical therapy. And she admits in her interview with Hidden True Crime that it was also partly because she wanted to leave Chris. Following surgery, it was my belief when I arrived that I would live here for approximately 1 year in order to sufficiently recover. Since that time, I've discovered that our marriage has ended, and as a result, I intend to continue to make Southern California the permanent residence for my son and me. On approximately December 14th, 1995, the respondent telephoned me and told me that he felt that we should separate because he was unhappy in the marriage. I asked him why. At Christmas time, he had decided to inform me that he wanted to end our marriage. The respondent indicated to me that he did not feel that there was any appropriate time to end a marriage. I discovered the respondent has been leading a double life, one part of which he has kept completely secret from me. I discovered that the respondent has had an ongoing relationship with a woman who he refers to as Pooh. I have found notes and cards passed between the two of them, a book which was gifted to the respondent by Pooh, entitled The Art of Sexual Ecstasy. References to a commemoration of and celebration of a 15th anniversary between the two of them. And interestingly, a necktie with a wedding design consisting of wedding cakes, wedding rings, etc. I do not know if the respondent and Pooh are supposedly married, and if so, if this marriage occurred prior to or subsequent to our marriage. Moreover, in looking back through bank statements and cancelled cheques for the past approximately 1.5 years, I have discovered that the respondent has spent excessive amounts of money travelling, on average, an average of $800 a month, in monthly telephone bills, etc. In addition, I have found ads in his personal items advertising PN graphic videos, dildos, etc. I believe that discovery may be extensive in order to determine if the respondent gifted this woman with our community assets. I am astounded and amazed. I had absolutely no idea that the respondent was living this existence parallel to our marriage. The respondent's employment has been in sales, and as a result, he has been required to travel a great deal of time. In the last 6 months of our marriage, the respondent was gone every week at least for 1/2 of the week. Prior to that time, the respondent usually travelled during the week and was only at home on the weekends if he came home at all. That paints a picture of a not-so-settled home life for Stephan during the period of time after his accident, that's for sure. I am presently receiving disability as my only income. I'm unable to work due to the fact that I have limited mobility and a great deal of pain as a result of foot surgery that I underwent in 1990. Since the surgery that caused the damage to my feet, I've had 4 major surgeries in order to try and correct the damage. I will be going into the 5th major surgery soon after the first of the year. After the surgery, it is expected that I will have to undergo physical therapy for at least 1 year. During this rehabilitation time, I will be barely mobile, and I do not even know when I will be fully ambulatory again. As a result of the fact that I'm unable to work and the respondent is employed earning in excess of $60,000 per year, I respectfully request that the court order the respondent to pay child support and spousal support to me according to guideline, and the fact that I believe that the respondent has the ability to pay. I further respectfully request that the court order that the respondent advance $4,000 in attorney fees and $1,000 in costs to enable me to maintain this action. I declare under the penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of California that the foregoing is true and correct. Now, I won't read through it, but you also have a subsequent mediation order for them to attend mediation in February of 96. So before I just quickly go over a few things to do with psychological development and everything, I just want to highlight the dates we're looking at. So we have, when Stephan was 8, he had his accident. So that was September of 94. Now, around that time, his older brother left. Possibly just prior to that time, maybe when Stephan was about 7, he left and went and joined the armed forces. For the 12 months after Stephan had his accident, it sounds like the family relationship between Deb and Chris wasn't all that great, and that Chris was probably not around all that much at all. And I would imagine, given Deb's personality, that there was a certain amount of animosity that occurred as well. Then you have 12 months after his accident, you have Deb basically uprooting him and taking him to California to live with her mother. And then you have all these proceedings beginning with the divorce. And somewhere in between all that, you have her doing some sort of lawsuit to do with her crippled ankles or whatever it was. And then even after all the crap was finished with the divorce, you have them filing a lawsuit with an insurance company to try and get money over Stephan's accident. And that was finally finished in 1998. So you have 4 years at least of majorly unsettling events in Stephan's life, all around the time of that accident. So to claim that, well, he changed after that accident is a little bit naive when you consider all the other things that were going on in his world. Now, I just want to highlight a few things in relation to where he would have been at developmentally also at that point in time. So for those of you who may have an interest in psychology, childhood development, etc., this is based on Piaget's developmental stages. This is talking about children between the age of 7 and 11. Basically, this falls into the age group where Stephan was at this point in time. And it's talking about kids are no longer hanging out with primarily with parents and other family members. They're increasingly involved with sports, friend groups, classrooms, teams, other social events. So their world is expanding. And they're also having to learn to cooperate, collaborate, listen, compete, and share. So there's new stresses on their environment. These were all things that Stephan was suddenly having to adapt to in his world. This is a child who has ADHD. This is when the cracks are definitely going to show. Friends and classmates play a role in how children progress through the industry versus inferiority stage. So this is a crucial period of time in terms of social development. And he was taken away from his group of friends to a completely different state, a completely new group of friends, and had to re-establish his social network. Social interactions with peers also help kids see how they compare. They may note that they are better than their friends or classmates at some things. They may also discover their talents, which can lead to feelings of confidence. Or it can go the other way and they discover that they can't sit still on the mat and they get into trouble with the teacher for that, and it starts to lower their confidence. Or their mother moves them to another state entirely, and as a child who doesn't interact well and plays on his own normally, you've suddenly taken him away from every support network that he had in his learning environment. That's going to destroy his confidence and lead to problems. So basically, you've taken an 9-year-old child at a crucial stage in their development away from all the things that are important at that point in time for their emotional, social development, and basically put them in a completely new situation that is going to have an impact on them. So in terms of self-concept, basically, in other cases, kids may perceive that they are not quite as capable as other kids, which can result in feelings of inadequacy. Kids who struggle with friendships or feel that they are behind their peers may end up feeling like they don't measure up. And here you have a boy who supposedly has ADHD being removed from his safe environment into a new school, probably struggling to interact with his new peers. We hear from his friends that his mother was really good at putting him down and making him feel inadequate. So you have all these issues going on developmentally at around the same stage when Deb and Chris are claiming that they saw the effects of TBI, basically. Now, even before pulling him away from his regular school and taking him to California, you're still looking at this same developmental phase where suddenly there is pressure on the child to basically start to grow up, essentially, to learn to cooperate, to learn to be obedient. Like I said, there's less of the play-based learning occurring, and for a child that has ADHD, this is when the cracks start to show. So we have claims of the TBI, and yet they never felt that there was any need to seek help or support for that. They didn't feel that it had reached a level that it needed any sort of attention, which to me says that they never saw it as a problem. Around the same time as all this was occurring, you have him moving into that developmental phase where problems do start to show with children. You also have his older brother just vanishing off the scene, essentially. And then within that 12-month period after his accident, you have tension in the household, followed by all this crap over the divorce. 12 months after the accident, he's whipped away from everything that he knows to another state, away from his father, and no doubt probably copped an earful of crap from his mother about how horrible his father was. I think when we look at all the things that were going on in his world around the time of this accident, and when we look at the fact that there's no medical records that show that there were any ongoing problems from this accident, and the fact that he was only in the hospital for 2 hours, they sent him home with what essentially was a warning to watch out for concussion. So, to me, this TBI argument just does not hold water at all. So I'm going to leave it at that. There's plenty more information out there in terms of psychological development around that age if you wanted to go and do a Google search and do further research. I won't bore you with going in depth, but certainly there is so much research. There are so many different learning theories, but pretty much all the learning theories agree that that stage between 7 and 11 is moving out of the infancy stage into the childhood stage, and when you are going to start seeing issues appear because of the expectations on the child and because of the emotional maturity, etc. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, help me get a few more subs, get my videos seen by liking my videos and leaving a comment below. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.